Welcome to Winning Inside, the show where we follow the journey from feeling defeated to winning. Here are your hosts, Cheddy Matthews and Michelle Wickman.
Hello, amazing people. Welcome to the Winning Inside podcast, where we discuss real issues, insights, and solutions to help you thrive in your day-to-day lives. We know life happens, and we can choose to be a spectator or a participant.
These conversations and stories are about the participants, the ones who made the choice to do the inner work and found a way to keep moving forward.
Hi, Cheddy.
Michelle, how are you? People are like, why are they laughing? They just got on. You have no idea how many times we have said the introduction and just kept on messing it up and messing it up and messing it up. And I said it in a Jamaican accent and Michelle was busting out laughing. Michelle did it in her own accent, which is awesome as well. She did it in a Filipino accent and I busted out laughing and it was on point too. So we're just like trying to be serious now. We're trying to put our serious faces on. I just want to let you know where we just came from. So Michelle.
Yeah. And fortunately or unfortunately, we can see each other on video. And I know you can't at this point, maybe someday, because the expressions are somewhat ridiculous at times.
Yes.
So
I love it.
But welcome, listener.
All right. I'm serious now.
Well, it doesn't have to be serious all the time. In fact, we actually were just discussing how quite a few of our conversations do lean towards serious topics. And certainly we interject laughter and we interject some lightheartedness where we can.
Yes.
And today we wanted to talk a little bit about
getting off the merry-go-round, or better yet, getting off the not so merry-go-round. But what does that mean?
Absolutely.
Like, yeah, but what does that mean?
Well, I think, oh my goodness, we talk about this all the time with one another.
Yes.
And I know I've spoken with quite a few individuals. Everybody knows what this means. We have patterns of behavior that sometimes they're long cycles and other times they're very quick and short cycles, right?
Yes.
So it can be a pattern of behavior in a relationship where you might recognize, oh, wait, how are we fighting again about the same conversation? And it's not necessarily because, well, it keeps happening with this other person, with my partner. Yeah. They keep screwing up in the same way. Sometimes it's actually just a pattern of repeatable behavior that we've gotten in such a habit about that it shows up time and time again.
Wow.
Or maybe it's even getting involved with the same sort of toxic relationship over and over and over again. So it's a repeated behavior that you want to stop, really.
Yeah. And the funny thing is you say relationship, but it could be relationship. It could be in your social life, your personal life, the way you deal with conflict, the way you spend money. It could be so many different things where you start to realize it's the same old thing, different scenario, different background, different, backdrop. However, the actions are the same. And when you take a pause and you step back, you're like, wait a minute, I have done this before. And it's almost like you're taking summer school and you're taking the course again. And the course again, and you're doing the same thing over and over and over again. And that happens because we're in a cycle and it's a loop. And even though some of the things may change, our behaviors are the same. So we do the same thing. Therefore, we get the same results and the same outcome. That can be so frustrating. So frustrating. But it happens all the time. And if you don't notice you're in it, just keep repeating that cycle. So hence we call it a merry-go-round, because if you remember as a kid, you get on a merry-go-round or a roundabout, depends on where you're from. And you push it and you just go around in circles. And it's great. What happens when you get that one kid who pushes it too fast and spinning real fast? You're just stuck on that thing and you want to get up, but you can't. You got to figure out a way to get off that thing. And if you don't figure out how to get off that thing, it's going to be a whole bunch of you getting sick and maybe some inertia is going to get to you and you're going to get a little vertigo, a little dizzy. You might puke, you might throw up, or you might be like me and just jump off, which is something I used to do all the time, which means I have a lot of scraped knees and busted up stuff. It doesn't matter how you get off. You have to find a way sometimes to get off and get out of that cycle. But it takes recognizing your inner cycle. And we could talk about this for days and days and days. But I do want to help people to be aware of the fact that sometimes you're in a cycle and you got to figure it out. And I think the first step is knowing that, yep, that's a repeated behavior. This is my default. This is my go-to. This is what I do. Every time I get into this kind of a situation, I behave this way. And if you start to realize that, and it's a pattern that is unhealthy and isn't producing fruit, isn't benefiting you in some way and some purpose in your life, then maybe you have to assess that and change that. Michelle's giving me the look like she's just laughing. We are so...
You just covered everything. What do you want me to talk about? No. Remember how we said you say a lot?
No.
All very good points, Cheddy. Thank you.
Okay. So in your own lives, I think one thing we could do is, you know this, Michelle, you're very introspective. You're one of those people that knows how to look inwards, which is pretty phenomenal, really. But can you share with people ways that you can see these patterns and behaviors in other people, or more importantly, in your own life? Because truth be told, we can see them in other people, but the issue isn't that. It's usually we can't see it in ourselves. So how do you identify when you're in a cycle or some kind of a negative loop, or as we call it, a not so merry-go-round?
Well, I think you really just addressed that, frankly. You made a comment of like, you recognize, hey, I'm feeling uncomfortable right now, right? So, I mean, you were a little bit more detailed in terms of feeling nauseous, so on and so forth.
I was visualizing my childhood. That's what that was. Yeah,
you very, very colorfully depicting that. So it's a very clear analogy. Could almost feel it.
Yeah, I felt it.
But in truth, it just boils down to, I can't tell you how many times I've asked myself, and other people have even made this statement to me. Here I am again. How did I get here again? Right. The bottom line is we know it.
Yes.
Right. We know this discomfort. We can apply the yo-yo dieter, or that is a classic cycle that shows up time and time again.
Yes.
That it's a very clear and easily understood example of, we go hard, we get excited, we get motivated, we eat clean, or we start a new diet, whatever it looks like. And then after a certain amount of days, we get burned out from it. And then we go back off the other side of the deep end, which is, poor eating habits, and maybe even worse than you were at before because you just spent the last 30 days restricting yourselves, right?
Yep.
So that's an example of a cycle. So the bottom line is we often know when we're in a cycle.
Yes.
It is that repeated discomfort that shows up, the repeated sort of, how did I get here again? Why is this happening again? And rather than ask yourself, why is this happening to me again? It's, how am I contributing to this experience showing up again? What are the choices that I'm making that are getting me to this space again? And you made a really good point of the facts, the circumstances around us may look a little different. Maybe it's a different person that you're in a relationship with. Maybe it's a different, gym that you're at. Maybe it's a different, whatever the circumstances can and will oftentimes look different, but it's the same discomfort and the same kind of gnawing thought of, how did I get here again?
Yes.
Right. And a lot of times that's where we're just almost at a loss and we don't know which way to go. So we just stay on the not so merry-go-round because it's a known discomfort rather than the unknown. And the unknown can be scarier and more filled with fear than the known discomfort that we have existed with oftentimes for years and years.
Holy Smokes. Can you say that one more time? Because that was like poignant. You're saying that my jaw hit the floor. That was profound. Say that one more time, please.
Well, it's the devil we know versus the devil we don't know.
Yes.
And this pattern of behavior is the devil we know, so to speak, right? So that's a phrase that we hear a lot. Mm-hmm. It's like the devil we know is safer than the devil we don't know.
Yeah.
We also don't know if the one we don't know is actually just an amazing, completely different existence.
Yes.
Right. But we're so familiar with our way of being that we simply stay on this not so merry-go-round.
Yeah. It's beautiful the way you put that, but we don't know what's on the other side. It's very similar to fear and doubt, those things that we don't want to deal with. But what's on the other side of fear and doubt? What's on the other side of you breaking that cycle? What is the alternative? It may be unknown, but is it as scary as the known that you know? Maybe, maybe not. But we become so comfortable with the things that we like. And we're sometimes so averse and so afraid of change that we never venture to find out if breaking that cycle, if this new alternative thing could be the right thing for us, could be the thing that changes our life and just propels us to where we want to go, because we never do it. And it's so much easier. You become so programmed to doing the same thing over and over again. Your body almost craves you doing the same thing again because it understands it. It knows it. It needs that dopamine hit of, yep, did that thing again. Even if you don't like it, your body on some level likes the dopamine hit you get from doing the same thing over and over again. It's how addictions form. It's how negative behaviors form, negative patterns form. It is. So let's replace one thing in that so that we can get a different outcome, whatever that is. And, there's a book I was telling Michelle about earlier called Habit. Charles Duhigg wrote a book about habit where it talks about that. You have a cycle. You have an issue, you do something, and you get a reward. And that's how these habits kind of form. We have behaviors that kind of are triggered by something. We do something and we get some kind of a response or result. If we can change one part of that cycle, we can get different results. But it's so hard sometimes to replace the negative behavior of our cycles with something else that may be more positive, because it requires work and it requires consistent work, because the old pattern doesn't go away. It's just you overpower it by doing something else. You overshadow it by doing something else. So replacing it with a different behavior can help. But I say these things like it's easy, and it's very easy for me to say. It isn't easy to do, because the first step is really, like Michelle said, recognizing it. And then you've got to make the scary step of doing something about it. And that is hard. It is hard. And what makes it tough is sometimes, Michelle, you can tell when I'm having a bad week. Forget a bad day. You can tell when I'm off, Michelle, you will see it and you will call me out on it. Does that mean that I see it? No, not always. But then if I reflect, I'm like, she's absolutely right. So sometimes people will see you in these patterns, but do we always want to hear it? No, because why not? It's my cycle. Leave my cycle alone. It's my favorite cycle. It's my security cycle. So you don't want to change that cycle, that pattern, because it's comfortable and it's known to you. Changing it is scary. So we get very defensive.
And I want to call out the point that the idea of habits, which you spoke to, is like there's a trigger, you make the choice, and then you get some sort of reward. Those are like the micro steps in the merry-go-round, right? So we're constantly making these little choices that are habitual, that keep us on this big merry-go-round. So they're tiny little habits, but they keep us on the big merry-go-round of a life cycle, right? A behavioral pattern versus a habit.
Yes.
So, shifting habits is like the bite-sized piece to start to change sort of the speed of that merry-go-round. Or maybe if you just get off of it, right? It actually can start to slow it down enough so that you can get off without the broken bones and the scrapes and the bruises. And yes, we're using those analogies to kind of paint the picture of, if it's one of those cycles that is so deeply ingrained, and I can use, eating patterns or health habits, right? They're so deeply ingrained in us that we might hit rock bottom before we're like, oh my God, it's time to change this cycle. Right. And change it for good. And that's where you start seeking help and assistance to make lifestyle changes that are permanent and long-term. Excuse me. But when it comes to those habits, those are the bite-sized pieces that you can slow it down enough. I'm so sorry.
It's okay.
You can slow it down enough where that you can really gain that awareness, because the awareness of these little micro steps, these little micro habits that you make every single day or you repeat every single day is what builds up to this big pattern. So I want to use a concrete example. I know I used the last example, but Cheddy, do you have a concrete example for this?
Oh, I would say yes. I would say For me, it's always saying yes. You know, that people pleaser part of me that likes to say yes to people, doesn't like to say no. When I decided that I'm always saying yes to other people, but in saying yes to other people, which is fine in and of itself, I would say yes to the detriment of my own yeses. I would say yes in such a way that I was really saying no to myself and yes to others. And that pattern would show up in so many areas of my life. So once I decided that it was time to change that, I start to assess it. This is not working. I've got to start. It's not a bad thing to say no to people. When I started to decide that, all I can remember is people saying, but you used to do that. But what's changed? You used to do that. You used to do it before. You've done it before. So people expected me to be in that cycle. So other people knew about the cycle, but the cycle wasn't beneficial for me. So I had to change that and start telling people no, because I needed time for myself. And I'll tell you, the thing that was hard about that was I had to change my belief system. I had to change the way I thought about certain behaviors, because for me, it was the right thing to do was to say yes to people. That was what I had to do. Then I realized, no, you can say yes to people sometimes, but you have to say yes to yourself as well. And what I was doing was saying yes to everyone else and neglecting myself, which was causing me destruction. It was self-destructive. I didn't think it was at first, but that self-neglect is almost like self-abuse. So self-love had to overcome, and I had to love myself first before I can love others. And it really goes to that analogy of I had to learn to put my oxygen mask on first so I could assist and help other people. So now I'm more balanced in that. So that was one of the big cycles for me. That was a huge cycle. I'm talking decades of doing that and not recognizing it because I thought that was what I was supposed to do.
So you gave an example. Oh my goodness. I'm so sorry.
It's all right.
So you gave an example of a habit of being, a pattern of behavior, but the cycle that I would venture to argue that the cycle that showed up in your life was Cheddy, and what I observed even is that you would be in a good mental space, complete burnout.
Yeah.
Good mental space, complete burnout. And so that is the merry-go-round, right? That he was on. And so those little micro steps, one of the habits that he had to alter in order to not have that big burnout show up for him every, 4 to 6 months?
Yep.
Yeah. Was to make sure that he was saying this has got to be an absolute hell yes, I want to be involved in this, and hell yes, I want to do this. Yes. Or it's got to be a no, because he was constantly saying yes to things. Yeah. And I certainly was involved in many conversations with him where I was like, what are you doing? Yeah. So
you, by the way.
Yeah, no. It's of course that's what we do for each other. We just spent 30 minutes prior to this talking about my cycles.
Hey, it's what we do.
Yeah.
It's what we do.
So it's those patterns of life, right? Where if you look at the big circle of a merry-go-round where do you start? It's oftentimes where you're in a good place and you're just going about and things are good in your relationship. Or for Cheddy, it was his mental space and his energy was just great, right? And then he would say yes to this person and then yes to this person. And then he still had his regular commitments for his own profession and his own business and his own clients. And then he was like, but I want to start a podcast. And so here we are doing a podcast. And then he said, I want to do this. And then he just kept saying yes and yes and yes. And he got to a significant burnout.
Yes.
And how long that burnout is, it was oftentimes dependent upon how quickly he can respond to the reality of his life in terms of where is the drain? Mm-hmm. Where do I need to plug the drain, plug the leaks in this energy space?
Yeah.
So he had to actually spend some time, take a step back and really evaluate what is it that I want in my life, right? And it's not just my energy, it's my overall life. And where is that investment of time that I am it's a non-negotiable? And then what's the next level beyond that? what is something that I'd like to do, but maybe not now. And maybe there's things that it's like, I really don't get any pleasure from this, but I'm a committed person and I hold myself to the highest integrity. So I'm going to see it through to the end. And it's like, well, maybe that's not the best choice. Because there is always an energy exchange, right? Yep. And if you are actually just putting energy out and you're not getting anything in return, then you have to evaluate, is that the right choice for you?
Yes.
So he started shifting his habits, which is his habit of saying yes and his habit of starting new ventures and new things that he's excited about. So that he could take a step back and really focus in on the things that he had in hand and manage the energy that he had.
Yes.
For me, I have a habit of doing something very similar. No surprises there.
No, really?
Yes. No surprises there whatsoever. A lot of people do. We have a habit of saying yes to way too many things and going hard and going all out and giving until we get to burnout. And I was going through that over probably the last few days. And having that conversation with somebody that I trust and I trust his mind space and he understands me and being able to just speak what's on my heart is so key to acknowledging where I'm at in this cycle, right? In the merry-go-round. And then really taking a moment to assess. And I'm going to take more time to assess that.
Good.
But taking a moment to assess and then identifying what habits do I want to shift in the next 2 to 3 weeks such that I can kind of shift this merry-go-round that I'm on. Yes. Can I change the trajectory? Can I just maybe slow it down a little bit?
Yes. Yes.
And then that we're making healthier choices for our longer term goals.
Love it. Love it. I'm gonna repeat that. You're making healthier decisions for your longer term goals. That is spot on. It's spot on. It means that your actions now are more aligned with your life's purpose, whatever that is, or your major goal. You're making sure that the things that you do get you in that direction. Even if you take a detour, it's still getting you in that direction. You're still doing things that are focused on where you want to go. Because a lot of times that cycle, it derails you. It's not going where you want to go. And then the thing is, it's a cycle, which means it goes right back to where it started, which usually isn't forward. So it doesn't have as much progress as we would think. So knowing it and recognizing it is a big deal. And when you do recognize it, you got 3 choices, Michelle. You got 3 choices. You can accept it and go around one more time. You can change it, which is what you're doing, or you can leave that whole situation. So you can, like you said, you can slow down that merry-go-round, change the trajectory, or you can totally leave that whole habit, that whole pattern system alone. Just walk away. You can do that too. But you've got to know what you want to do, why you want to do it. And I wouldn't recommend making a rash decision. But make a decision that's the right decision, because if it's a cycle that takes you, let's say, like in my case, a 6-month cycle, you want to make sure it's the right decision. So you're not back 6 months doing the same thing you were doing 6 months prior. So you got to make sure you make the right decisions, because these things, like you said, these are more than just habits. These are things that are so long and it takes a long time to turn them and change them sometimes. And so many things can be affected by the change that you got to make sure you're committed to it. And you're focused and intentional about the changes that you want in that. So that's how merry-go-rounds can affect your life. I love that.
Yeah, I totally agree. I just think about how absurd it almost sounds that we're in this world, we have access to so much. And we have so much knowledge. We have so much inspiration. We have so many positive, amazing things at our fingertips. Yeah. And yet we do get into these old patterns of being that don't serve the ultimate goals. And when I say goals, it's not just about having something tangible. It's the way of being. It's what we talked about during our goals conversation just a couple weeks ago. So what is it that we really want to have in our lives? And look at our ways of being, look at the habits and the cycles that are in our life and take a moment to really assess, is this what I really want? But to Cheddy's point, and he mentioned this earlier, it's not just the dopamine hit. Oftentimes when we are familiar with this elevated stress cycle in our lives, and that stress goes away. So our cortisol levels drop, all of that stress goes away. That can feel uncomfortable.
Yeah.
And that's kind of the wildest part, is that you think we all aspire to not have stress, but if we're familiar with that sort of constant level of stress, when that goes away, we're like, wait a minute, wait a minute.
What's going on? Yeah.
And you may actually seek that out, right?
Yes.
So people will seek out these risks, and people who love adrenaline junkies, they're looking for that energy. And Cheddy is definitely one of them.
Yes.
They're looking for that kind of replacement of energy.
Oh my gosh. Will you stop calling me out, please? Like seriously.
So these are all elements of it. And that's why it's so much bigger than just this conversation of, hey, recognize the merry-go-round and you'll get off of it. Just jump off and, break a few bones, but that's okay. They'll heal. No, it's bigger than that.
Yeah.
However, the first step is recognizing that it is a habit. It is a cycle that you do not want to do anymore. You want to get off this merry-go-round, right? So recognizing it and recognizing sort of the habits that facilitate this merry-go-round.
Yeah.
And I love Cheddy's example of his habits was to say yes. The merry-go-round was, at what point am I going to hit burnout where I am not functional anymore with my personal relationships, with my professional work? I'm not functioning, if at all, but definitely not to the best of my capabilities.
Nowhere near.
So he went from, these are bad habits. Oh my gosh, look at where my cycle is. I'm at the burnout stage. The last time I was here was about 6 months ago.
Mm-hmm.
That's how he figured it out. So that's one way you can figure it out. When you're at sort of like the negative point in your merry-go-round cycle, you're like, oh my gosh, I'm in this huge fight with my partner. I am in my second week of terrible eating and I stopped working out. I'm not calling myself out. It's fine.
Not at all.
No, and I didn't call myself out like 2 weeks ago either. It's fine.
Didn't do it.
So if you're in that point of the cycle where you're like, why am I here again? Really take a moment to look at, why are you here again? How did you get to this point?
Yeah.
Right? And find those micro habits. Cheddy's instinct to say yes. For me, similar, my instinct to say yes. Where you then get to this point again.
Yes.
So, and those micro habits that's what's going to change that big merry-go-round cycle.
Exactly.
That's what's going to shift it.
Exactly. Oh, wow. If that wasn't well stated, I don't know what was. I'm not going to add to that because I think that was pretty awesome. But let's say this. It's easy for us to say these things and it's not easy to apply. Let's not be fooled and make it seem like this is just easy. Oh, just change your habit. No. Oh, just change your behavior. Oh, just jump off the merry-go-round. No, it's not that easy. But the first step is knowing you got to take a step. If you know you got to take a step, take the step. Take the step. You're worth it. You're worth the effort and energy and the risk of doing so. You are. Because what's on the other side of that, with that new cycle that you get into, replacing some of those negative behaviors and negative patterns, could totally change your life. It really could. And you're worth the opportunity. You're worth the risk of doing it. And it's brave, but I believe if you're even considering that in your life, you're brave enough. You've already had the awareness of it. If you're like, I don't like where things are going, I'm here again. Your mind is already telling you, hey, we're in that space again. It's giving you alarms. Your body's telling you, hey, your being is telling you something's not right. We've done this before. We've got the same result. And if you keep doing the same thing and getting the same results, something needs to change. So change it. You have that capability. You have the capacity to change it. You have the courage to change it. You have the skills to change it. And if you need help, find an accountability partner, Michelle, who can help you when you're in these situations, that can kind of help you to get through it, to kind of help you, show you where you are, help you, keep you accountable, and celebrate you when you kind of get to those next steps and take other decisions that aren't usually comfortable or familiar to you, but you're willing to do it for the greater good. Why not? Why not?
Why not?
Yep. So, Like we said in a very old podcast, screw it and do it. Just get it done. Get off the merry-go-round. And you don't have to dive off the merry-go-round. You can put your foot down. I never like doing that because it would kill my shoes, but you can always put your foot on the ground and slow it down, because slowing things down sometimes does enable you to get what you want or see things with more clarity. So hopefully if you've ever had a question in your life and you kind of wonder where I am, what's going on, and you just have those doubts in your mind about these cycles and these patterns and these habits that you keep going through, hopefully this will give you just enough to kind of at least explore that and take the introspective step to look and say, okay, where am I? What's going on? Why did I do this? How did I get here? I've been here before. Why did I do this again? And is it serving me or is it not serving me? Just ask yourself certain questions and see what the answers are, because then you might find the solutions based on the questions you ask. That's all I have to say about that. And I appreciate your time once again. It's always good to be on the mic and talking to you and sharing and just, spitting out some love. That's all I've got to say.
Well, we want to hear from you.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah, we want to hear from you. Where are you at in your cycle? Where are you at on that merry-go-round? And what micro habit? What
I love that.
What micro habit are you wanting to change?
Yes.
So if you enjoyed today's podcast, please subscribe, follow, share, and most importantly, use whatever adds value to your amazing life.
Remember, even if life puts barriers in our way, we are still moving forward. Sign in next week for a new episode of Winning Inside.
Thank you for listening to Winning Inside with Cheddy Matthews and Michelle Wickman. If you enjoyed today's show, please make sure to click the follow button, rate and review at Apple Podcasts, Spotify, Audible, or wherever you get your podcast. You can connect with Cheddy and Michelle at winninginside.io. Keep listening. Another episode is coming soon.